For centuries, the stars above Earth had been quiet. Once, humanity had shouted into the void, sending radio waves, songs, and hopeful messages across the galaxy. But the galaxy had answered, and the answer was cruel. The empires of the stars had declared Earth too dangerous, too unpredictable, too wild to be allowed a voice among them. The punishment was silence. Every probe Earth sent into the dark was destroyed. Every colony ship was intercepted before it left the system. Satellites vanished without explanation. To ordinary people, it seemed like failure. To governments, it became humiliation. But to the hidden watchers in the night skies, it was control. The galaxy had wrapped chains around Earth's throat and forced it into silence. At first, humanity tried to endure. Leaders told their people to be patient, to keep building, to keep trying. But every attempt ended in fire. Rockets burned in the atmosphere. Space stations fell apart. Colonies never reported back. Hope became despair. Dreams turned to dust. Generations grew up under a sky filled with stars they could see but could never reach. Yet, the silence was never complete. In dark rooms and hidden bunkers, whispers remained. Soldiers remembered comrades lost to unseen fleets. Scientists remembered signals cut off mid-transmission. Families remembered explorers who never returned. They did not believe in accidents. They believed in chains. They believed in watchers. They believed that the galaxy was afraid of Earth. And they were right. The alien empires did not fear Earth's ships, for they were small. They did not fear Earth's weapons, for they were weak. What they feared was Earth's will. Humanity had always been restless, always hungry, always unwilling to kneel. Across their history, humans had risen from nothing again and again, turning defeat into survival, survival into power. The galaxy feared what might happen if that spirit reached the stars, so they built a cage of silence. But cages never last, forever. In the deserts of Earth, far from any city, men and women gathered in secret. Their equipment was old, their power supplies unstable, but their eyes burned with fire. In frozen wastelands, hidden labs buzzed with energy, cables running deep beneath the ice. In mountains, engineers carved out halls where giant machines hummed. They all worked toward one purpose: the broadcast. It would not be like the hopeful signals of the past. It would not beg for peace or ask for help. This would be different. A single message carried across the stars, impossible to block, impossible to ignore. It would not ask for recognition. It would demand respect. It would show the galaxy that silence was no longer enough to control Earth. Still, the risk was great. If discovered too soon, Earth could be destroyed in a single strike. The alien fleets orbiting nearby had weapons that could burn continents. The councils that ruled the stars had exterminated worlds before. Everyone involved knew the truth. The final broadcast could be humanity's last act, but even so they worked. For silence was worse than death. Ordinary people did not know. Children played under the stars, unaware that their skies were chained. Workers built lives in cities filled with light, never guessing how close the galaxy watched them. Only a few carried the secret. Soldiers who guarded strange facilities, scientists who disappeared from public life, leaders who carried the burden in their hearts but spoke nothing of it in public. The silence above Earth grew heavier with each passing year. It pressed down like a weight, choking every dream of the stars. But in the shadows, the storm was building. Generations of rage, grief, and hope were being shaped into one message. They called it the final broadcast. It was not just a signal. It was a weapon. A storm of sound and light, crafted from frequencies no jammer could block, powered by machines that could shake the atmosphere itself. When it launched, every ear in the galaxy would hear it. Every world would feel it. Every empire would know the truth. Earth was not broken. Earth was not silent. Earth was not finished. The alien empires grew complacent. They looked at Earth and saw weakness. They mocked its failures, dismissed its struggles, and forgot that silence is not the same as surrender. They believed Earth had accepted its prison. That was their mistake. On one cold night, far from the lights of any city, the machines came alive. Towers hidden beneath mountains thrummed with energy. Antennas disguised as ruins lit up with strange power. The ground trembled as cables burned with light. Deep beneath the oceans, giant coils spun, drawing power from the planet itself. The silence was cracking. Humanity was ready. The stars above still shone, distant and cold, but something new moved below them. A storm waiting to rise. A voice ready to break free. A broadcast that would carry the wrath of an entire world. The silence of Earth was ending, and when it broke, the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy believed Earth was broken. From afar, it looked like a quiet, weak world with no power left to rise. Alien empires mocked its silence, pointing to the dark skies above Earth as proof that the humans had surrendered. Yet beneath the surface, in places no telescope could see, voices had never gone silent. They were buried deep under rock, under oceans, under secrecy. And they were waiting. In hidden bunkers, old machines hummed. Their designs were patched together from forgotten technology, scavenged parts, and raw determination. Scientists who had been erased from public records worked in shadows, their names never spoken, their faces unseen. Soldiers guarded steel doors, standing watch, for intruders who would never be allowed to leave alive. These were not men and women of fame. They were ghosts of a war that had never officially begun. The galaxy thought the silence was victory, but the silence was only a mask. For decades, humanity had hidden its brightest minds, those who could not accept defeat. They were told they were failures. They were told to retire, to give up, to let go. Yet each one was secretly pulled into the underground, sworn to secrecy, bound to a task that most of the world would never know. They were not building colonies. They were not building ships. They were building a voice, not the gentle voice of diplomacy, not the hopeful voice of peace. This voice would carry the weight of loss, the fury of betrayal, the promise of vengeance. It would be more than sound. It would be a weapon. But the risk was enormous. Every hidden signal, every spark of strange energy was noticed. Alien patrols scanned Earth's skies daily, their ships circling the planet like vultures. Their scanners were sharp, their ears sensitive, their suspicion endless. A single mistake could bring fire raining down, ending humanity before the message was ever spoken. The silence that shielded Earth was also a blade hanging above its head. Still, the buried voices did not stop. In deserts, engineers tested transmitters disguised as sandstorms. In frozen wastelands, power stations hid beneath ice sheets, their glow masked by auroras. In deep seas, giant coils rested in black trenches, their hum mistaken for earthquakes. Each location was invisible to alien eyes. Each one carried a fragment of the broadcast. It was not just a single machine. It was thousands, scattered across the world, linked together by coded signals. One alone would be destroyed. Together, they could not be silenced. When the time came, they would rise in unison, a storm of voices that no empire could stop. But the most dangerous part was not the machines. It was the people. The aliens knew humans were dangerous not for their tools, but for their will. So, they sent spies, disguised merchants, wandering teachers, so-called advisors who walked among humans searching for hints of rebellion. Some even tried to convince humans themselves that resistance was foolish, that silence was safety, that speaking out was suicide. Many humans believed them. They chose comfort, fear, and denial. They told themselves the stars were never meant for Earth. They called dreamers mad, rebels fools, and fighters dangerous. This was the second cage, the cage inside the human mind. But cages cannot hold everyone. There were still those who refused, pilots who remembered watching rockets burn, parents who buried children lost to accidents, scientists who could not forget signals cut off mid-sentence, soldiers who had seen fleets in the dark sky, fleets that governments pretended did not exist. These people became the buried voices. They worked in silence, but their silence was sharper than any blade. In the command chamber of a hidden facility, A man stared at the screens glowing before him. His hair was white, his hands scarred from years of labor, but his eyes burned with youth. He had worked on satellites in his younger days before they were all lost. Now he worked on something far greater. "We are ready," he whispered to no one. His words echoed off steel walls. "When the time comes, they will hear us." In another bunker, deep under mountains, a woman stood before a great machine. It pulsed with light, like a heart beating in the dark. She reached out, her fingers brushing the console. Her family thought she had died years ago in an accident. She had not corrected them. They would never know she was alive, never know what she had built, but they would hear her voice when the broadcast rose. That would be enough. The buried voices stretched across Earth, connected not by wires, but by will. They knew they might die. They knew they might fail. But failure was already their daily life. Every year of silence was failure. Every star they could not reach was failure. What more could they lose? Above, the galaxy circled like wolves around a wounded prey. It was not ready yet. The machines were still incomplete. The power was not yet gathered. The message was still being shaped. But the buried voices knew the day was near. Soon the silence would break. Soon the broadcast would rise, and when it did, it would not be a song. It would not be a plea. It would not be soft. It would be thunder. And the galaxy would never sleep in peace again. The night over Earth was calm. The stars shone cold, unaware of the storm waiting below. Cities glowed with their own lights, and ordinary people went about, their lives, never knowing how close they were to history. The galaxy believed Earth was silent. The alien empires watched with arrogance, their patrol fleets drifting unseen above the atmosphere, but under oceans, beneath mountains, inside frozen caverns, humanity's buried voices were ready. The last silence was about to break. In a bunker carved deep into rock, the final switch was prepared. Generators hummed like beasts waiting to be released. Antennas hidden across the globe flickered alive, invisible to the naked eye but pulsing with raw power. Engineers and scientists stood in silence, their faces pale, their hearts hammering. They had given their lives to this moment, and they knew the cost. If the aliens intercepted too soon, fire would rain down. But if they succeeded, the galaxy would hear them at last. The commander gave the signal. The machines roared to life. First came the vibration, a low hum that spread through tunnels, through cables, through the very bones of the Earth. Then came the light. Towers disguised as ruins began to glow, coils spinning faster and faster, feeding energy into the sky. The oceans churned as deep-sea stations ignited, releasing waves of power that rippled like undersea earthquakes. Above, the poles, the auroras, flared so bright that entire continents looked up in shock. And then the sky cracked. A blast of energy tore upward, brighter than lightning, louder than thunder. It ripped through clouds, scattering storms, painting the heavens with fire. The alien fleet circling above reeled back in confusion. Their scanners screamed with readings that made no sense. Their commanders shouted orders, trying to jam the frequency. But this was no ordinary transmission. This was not a signal carried on fragile waves. It was a storm of power, built to cut through every block, every wall, every chain. The broadcast had begun. Across nearby star systems, alien stations shuddered as the message arrived. At first it was noise, a roar so loud it shattered delicate receivers. Then the noise shaped itself into words, images, and visions. The galaxy saw what Earth had endured. Cities burned, rockets shattered, colonies erased, explorers lost in silence. The broadcast carried humanity's grief, their rage, their defiance. It carried the faces of those who had been silenced, the names of those who had been erased. It carried the promise that no more would be lost in silence. But the message did not end there. It carried a warning. This is Earth. You tried to silence us. You failed. The words struck like fire across the stars. Every world, every station, every fleet that heard them froze. For centuries, the humans had been denied. For centuries, they had been forced into silence. Now, Their voice roared across the galaxy. Unstoppable, undeniable. The alien patrols above Earth panicked. They launched weapons at the transmission sites, but it was too late. Every strike destroyed only one piece of a vast network. For every tower burned, 10 more lit up. For every bunker shattered, another took its place. The broadcast was alive. It spread like lightning, feeding on itself, growing stronger with every second. On alien worlds, ordinary citizens stopped in their tracks as the human message reached them. Farmers in fields dropped their tools. Merchants froze at their stalls. Soldiers paused mid-march. They had been told humanity was broken, weak, silent. But the voice they heard was not weak. It was thunder. In the grand chambers of the alien council, rulers watched with horror. They demanded their fleets cut the signal, but their generals shook their heads. The broadcast was everywhere, carried not just on human machines, but through the very fabric of space. To silence it now would be like silencing the stars themselves. The message grew sharper. We do not beg. We do not kneel. We do not forget. The price of war will be written in fire. The silence you gave us is broken forever. The galaxy trembled. Fleets scrambled. Entire civilizations whispered in fear. They had thought Earth was caged. They had thought Earth was finished. Instead, they now faced a truth too heavy to deny. Humanity had not died in silence. Humanity had risen in it. Back on Earth, the people looked up at the blazing sky. They did not understand the machines, the signals, or the science, but they understood the truth. They could feel it in their bones, hear it in the thunder, see it in the light that turned night into day. Their world had spoken. Their voice had returned. In that moment, the silence that had lasted for centuries shattered forever. The broadcast echoed into the void, carried farther than any human signal before it. Empires that had never cared about Earth now turned their eyes toward it in fear. Soldiers who once mocked humanity now whispered of its wrath. The chains were broken, and the galaxy, for the first time, listened. The broadcast spread like wildfire. Across the spiral arms of the galaxy, it poured through. Every receiver, every listening post, every hidden ear. Entire worlds froze to hear the sound of Earth's voice, angry, defiant, alive. It was a voice that no empire had expected to hear again, a voice they had spent centuries burying. But here it was, rising louder than thunder, unbroken, undeniable. In alien marketplaces, traders stopped mid-bargain as screens flared with images of Earth's pain. Soldiers on distant battlefronts lowered their weapons as humanity's message bled through their helmets. Children in faraway cities whispered the words in fear. Across the galaxy, people who had never cared for Earth now saw its fury and could not look away. The rulers, however, were not silent. In the Grand Council of Empires, panic turned into rage. Voices clashed in the chambers as leaders demanded action. Some called for Earth to be erased at once, burned from existence before it grew stronger. Others argued that striking too soon could backfire, that humanity had clearly built something powerful, something hidden, something dangerous. The council was divided, but all agreed on one truth: the silence had failed. Above Earth, alien fleets swarmed. Ships the size of cities darkened the skies, their weapons glowing, their engines burning. They fired on the transmission towers, hammering the planet with fire. Cities trembled, oceans boiled, deserts cracked. But the broadcast did not die. For every tower destroyed, 3 more lit up. For every bunker erased, another took its place. The message had become more than machines. It had become a storm that lived in the air itself. You tried to silence us, the broadcast roared, carried on waves of energy that bent the stars. Now, hear the cost. And then the message changed. It was no longer only voices, no longer only images of loss. Now it showed what Earth had built in the shadows. Hidden fleets rising from underground hangars, weapons that drew power from storms, armored stations buried in oceans, waiting to rise. The galaxy had believed Earth was broken. The truth was, far more terrifying. Earth had been preparing. On alien ships, soldiers watched the broadcast in horror. For years they had been told humanity was primitive, weak, incapable of resistance. But the pictures told a different story. Weapons gleaming in the dark, armies marching in silence, thunder-forged machines that no one had ever seen before. Humanity was not pleading for mercy. Humanity was promising war. The price of war. In one council chamber, a ruler slammed his hand against the table. "We must strike now before they rise further," he shouted. But his voice trembled. He remembered the images of lightning striking alien fleets in orbit, the wreckage already falling like burning stars. Others in the chamber shook their heads. "Strike too hard," they warned, "and you may awaken something worse." The galaxy, once united in mocking Earth, was now divided in fear. On Earth itself, the people finally understood the truth. For years they had believed the silence was natural, that their failures were their own. Now they saw the lies crumble. Now they knew their place in the galaxy had been stolen from them. Rage swept through the cities. Crowds filled the streets, shouting into the night, their voices echoing the broadcast. They were no longer silent. The alien fleets rained fire, but humanity did not cower. Underground bunkers struck back with hidden weapons, launching bursts of energy that ripped patrol ships apart. Coastal stations unleashed storms that swallowed cruisers whole. For the first time, Earth fought openly and the galaxy saw it. Still, humanity knew the cost. Cities burned under alien retaliation. Entire regions vanished in fire. The final broadcast carried not only words of fury, but images of the destruction Earth endured. The galaxy was forced to watch as children screamed under falling ash, as families fled burning homes as oceans rose in fury. Yet the message never wavered. It kept speaking, it kept roaring, it kept warning. "You think war is your power," the broadcast thundered. "But war is our element. We have paid the price 1,000 times. If you make us pay again, the galaxy will burn with us." Those words spread like lightning, etched into every listening mind. For the first time, empires that once believed themselves eternal felt fear not of invasion, but of retribution. Humanity had nothing left to lose, and a species with nothing left to lose was the most dangerous enemy of all. Back in the command chambers of Earth's hidden stations, the architects of the broadcast stood in silence. They watched their work ripple across the stars, watched empires tremble, watched fear grow. They knew Earth could still fall. They knew alien fleets could still win, but victory was no longer the only goal. The truth was enough. Humanity had spoken and the galaxy had listened. Even if Earth was destroyed, the broadcast would remain, carried on signals that no empire could erase. The voice of Earth would outlive the planet itself. And in that truth, the galaxy saw the price of war. The broadcast had ended, but its echoes lived on. Across the galaxy, the voice of Earth lingered in every receiver, burned into every memory. Entire civilizations whispered the words long after the signal had faded. Traders repeated them in markets. Soldiers muttered them in barracks. Children spoke them in fear as if reciting a warning written into the stars. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy trembled. For the first time in living memory, the great empires were unsure. Their fleets still orbited Earth, their weapons still burned hot, their councils still debated war. Yet none dared to strike the final blow. They had seen the images. They had felt the thunder. They had heard the promise. War with humanity would not be victory, it would be ruin. The rulers sat in silence. Some shouted for vengeance, demanding Earth be crushed before it could rise again. Others whispered caution, warning that Earth was no longer weak. Every faction feared the same thing. What if the humans were telling the truth? What if the price of war was greater than the galaxy itself could pay? On distant worlds, rebellion stirred. The broadcast had not only spoken for Earth, it had spoken for all who lived under the shadow of silence. Small colonies, once ignored, now whispered of defiance. Slave worlds dreamed of freedom. Entire species who had once accepted their place now wondered, if Earth could rise against the empires, why couldn't they? Humanity's final broadcast had cracked more than silence. It had cracked control. Meanwhile, on Earth, the people stood between despair and triumph. Cities still burned from the alien bombardments. Families mourned their dead. Entire regions lay in ruins. And yet, no one felt broken. Instead, their voices rose higher than ever before. Crowds filled the streets, chanting words from the broadcast. Soldiers marched with new pride, their wounds carried like badges. Scientists who had built the hidden towers walked openly for the first time, hailed as heroes. Earth was bleeding, but it was alive. Above the planet, Project Zeus hung in silence. The warship's hull was scorched, its weapons dimmed, its engines weary from battle, yet it remained unbroken, like the world below. Inside, its commanders watched the skies, waiting for the fleets to strike again. They knew the danger was not gone, but they also knew the galaxy had changed. No empire could look at Earth the same way again. In the Alien Council, fear turned into uneasy calculation. "If we strike, we may destroy them," one leader said, his voice trembling. "But in destroying them, we may destroy ourselves. Can we afford to test their threat?" Another ruler leaned forward, whispering words none had ever spoken before. "Perhaps it is wiser to listen." The galaxy trembled not because of Earth's weapons, but because of its will. The broadcast had revealed a truth the